For 4,000 years, humanity had been calling into the darkness of space. They sent radio waves. They sent light signals. They sent small ships carrying messages in every language humans had ever spoken. Generation after generation looked up at the stars and asked the same question. Is anyone out there? Is anyone listening? No one ever answered. By the year 6147, most people had stopped hoping. The old dream of meeting alien life had become a sad joke. Children learned about it in history class. They learned how their ancestors had believed so strongly that someone would answer. They learned how wrong those ancestors had been. But not everyone had given up. On the frozen moon of Europa, far from Earth, there was a small building made of metal and ice. It was called the Deep Signal Observatory. Inside this building, old machines still listened to the stars. They had listened for hundreds of years. They had heard nothing but empty noise. The director of this place was a woman named Una. She was 63 years old. Her hair was gray and her eyes were tired, but they still held a small light of hope. She had worked at the observatory for 40 years. Every single day, she came to work and checked the machines. Every single day, the machines showed her nothing. Her friends told her to stop. Her family told her to retire. Even the government had cut her money 17 times. They said she was wasting resources on a dead dream. But Una would not stop. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her. Stories about the first messages sent into space. Stories about how excited people had been. How full of hope. Her grandmother had believed until her last breath that someone would answer. Una had promised her she would keep listening. Someone has to keep the light on, Una would say when people asked why she stayed. Even if I am the only one who sees it burning. She had a small team working with her. Most of them were young people who could not find better jobs. They did not share her hope. They just needed the work. But there was one young man named Taiho who was different. He was 28 years old, with kind eyes and a quick smile. He had come to the observatory 5 years ago, expecting to stay for only a few months. But something about Una's faith had touched him. He stayed. On the morning of March 14th, 6147, Taiho was alone in the main control room. Una was in her office, drinking tea and reading old reports. The machines hummed quietly, as they always did. The screens showed nothing but static, as they always did. Then something changed. At first, Taiho thought it was a mistake. A glitch in the system. The machines were old, after all. They broke down sometimes. But when he looked closer, his hands began to shake. The static had changed. There was a pattern in it. Numbers. Simple numbers at first. 1, 2, 5, 7, 11. Prime numbers. Numbers that could not be made by accident. Numbers that could only come from an intelligent mind. Taiho ran. He burst into Una's office so fast that he knocked over a chair. His face was white. His eyes were wild. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Una stood up slowly. She had seen young workers get excited before. Sometimes solar winds created false signals. Sometimes old equipment made strange noises. She had learned not to hope too quickly. What is it? She asked calmly. Director, Taiho finally managed to say, you need to see this. Right now, they walked back to the control room together. Una moved slowly. She was preparing herself for disappointment. She had been disappointed so many times before, but when she saw the screen, she stopped breathing. The pattern was clear. Perfect. Prime numbers. Then geometric shapes, squares, triangles. Then something else. Something that made her old heart nearly stop. It was a response. Not just any response. It was a response to humanity's very first message. The message that Earth had sent out 4,127 years ago. The message that contained pictures of humans, sounds of Earth, and simple mathematics to show that intelligent beings lived here. Someone had received that message. Someone had understood it. And now, after 4,000 years of silence, they were answering. Una sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Her hands were shaking. Tears were forming in her tired eyes. "Is this real?" she whispered. Taiho checked the data again and again. He ran every test he knew. He looked for any possible natural explanation. There was none. "It is real," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Director, it is real. Someone is out there. Someone has been listening all along." Una covered her mouth with her hand. 40 years. 40 years of empty silence. 40 years of people telling her she was foolish. 40 years of loneliness and doubt and stubborn. Foolish hope, and now this. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of all the generations who had looked up at the stars and wondered. She thought of all the scientists who had died waiting for an answer that never came. "We need to tell everyone," she said finally. Her voice was steady now, even though tears were running down her face. "The whole world needs to know." She looked at the signal on the screen. The pattern pulsed like a heartbeat, like someone knocking on a door, like someone saying hello. After 4,000 years of silence, humanity was no longer alone. The universe had finally answered, and everything was about to change. The news spread like fire across human space. Within 1 hour, every news station on Earth was talking about the signal. Within 2 hours, the message had reached the Mars colonies. Within 6 hours, all 300 worlds where humans lived knew the truth. They were not alone. People reacted in different ways. Some cried with joy. Some fell to their knees in prayer. Some refused to believe it was real. In the great cities of Earth, millions gathered in the streets, looking up at the sky with wonder and fear. In the cold space near Neptune, Admiral Junho received the news on his flagship, a massive ship called the Endurance. He was a tall man with a serious face and silver hair cut short. For 30 years, he had commanded the Terran Defense Fleet. In all that time, he had never fired a weapon in anger. Humanity's wars had ended long ago, but now he faced a question no military officer had ever faced before. "We do not know anything about them," said his tactical officer. A woman named Myray. She was young and sharp, with careful eyes that missed nothing. "They could be friendly. They could be dangerous. We have no way to know." Junho looked out the window at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, something was waiting. "Prepare the fleet," he said quietly. "Not to attack, just to be ready. We must protect our people, whatever comes." Back on Earth, the governing council met in emergency session. The council chamber was a great round room in the city of Geneva. 12 seats surrounded a central table. 12 people who spoke for all of humanity. Prime Counselor Yoonji sat at the head of the table. She was 142 years old. Modern medicine had extended human life far beyond what it once was, and she had used every extra year in service to her people. Her hair was white as snow, but her mind was still sharp. Around her, the other counselors argued loudly. "We must respond at once," shouted Counselor Dongho. He was a young man, barely 60, full of energy and excitement. "This is what we have dreamed of for thousands of years. We cannot stay silent now and tell them what," replied Counselor Somi. She was older, more careful. "Should we give them our location? Our population numbers? What if they mean us harm? What if they mean us well?" Dongho shot back. "What if they have been waiting just as long as we have?" The argument went back and forth. Fear against hope. Caution against courage. The same battle that humans had fought within themselves since the beginning of time. Finally, Yoonji raised her hand. The room fell silent. 4,000 years ago, she said slowly, our ancestors made a choice. They chose to reach out. They chose to say hello to the darkness. They did not know who would hear them. They did not know what would happen. But they chose hope over fear. She looked around at the faces watching her. "Are we so different from now?" she asked. "Have we grown so old that we have forgotten how to be brave? Our ancestors would be ashamed if we hid from this moment." She stood up, though her old bones ached. "We will respond," she declared. "We will be careful, yes. We will be wise. But we will not be cowards. We will introduce ourselves the way our ancestors did. With hope, with honesty, with the best of what humanity is." The council voted. The decision was made. Humanity would answer. Meanwhile, on a research station called Horizon, floating in orbit around Mars, a team of scientists worked day and night to understand the alien signal. They had studied it from every angle. They had run it through every computer program they had. Dr. Jiwoo led the team. She was a linguist, a person who studied languages. She had spent her whole life learning how creatures communicate. Now she faced the greatest challenge of her career. How do you understand a language from beings who are not human? How do you find meaning in sounds that have never been heard before? For weeks, she worked without sleep. She studied the patterns in the signal. She looked for structure, for grammar, for anything she could recognize. Then, late one night, she found something amazing. "The signal has 2 layers," she told her exhausted team. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they were bright with discovery. "The first layer is mathematics. Numbers and shapes. Things that any intelligent species would understand." She pulled up the data on the main screen. "But there is a second layer hidden beneath. It is not mathematics. It is something else. Something I have never seen before." The team leaned forward. "I think," Jiwoo said carefully, "they are trying to send emotions, feelings. The patterns change in ways that suggest happiness, sadness, longing. As if they are not just talking to us, but trying to make us feel what they feel." She paused. Her voice became soft. "And do you know what feeling comes through most clearly? Loneliness. They've been lonely, just like us. They have been waiting in the darkness, hoping someone would answer. Just like us." The room was silent. Jiwoo looked at her team with tears in her eyes. "They are not just saying hello," she whispered. "They are saying they understand. They know what it feels like to be alone. They know what it means to hope." In that moment, across human space, something shifted. The fear did not disappear. The caution did not fade. But alongside those feelings, something else began to grow. The understanding that whoever was out there might not be so different after. All. The universe suddenly felt a little less cold, and the silence that had lasted 4,000 years began, at last, to break. The alien signal contained more than just a greeting. Hidden within its patterns was a set of numbers, coordinates, a location in space, 112 light years from Earth, a star system called Kepler 442, and along with the location came something else. An invitation. "They want to meet us," Director Yuna announced to the council. Her voice was calm, but her heart was beating fast. Face to face. In person. The council chamber buzzed with whispers. Meeting in person was different from exchanging signals. Signals were safe. Signals could be ignored. But sending people meant taking a risk. It meant trusting that whoever was waiting would not hurt them. "How do we know this is not a trap?" asked Counselor Somi. "How do we know they are not trying to lure us into danger?" "We do not know," Yuna admitted. "But we have been calling into the darkness for 4,000 years. Now someone has finally answered. If we are too afraid to meet them, what was the point of calling in the first place?" The debate lasted for days. In the end, hope won over fear. Humanity would send a delegation, But who should go? Who could represent 4,000 years of dreaming? Who could speak for all of humanity? In the end, they chose 5 people. The first was Captain Saijin. He was 54 years old, a pilot who had spent 30 years flying rescue missions in the dangerous asteroid belts. His hands were steady. His mind was calm. He had saved thousands of lives during his career. Now he would carry the hopes of billions. The second was Dr. Jiwoo, the linguist who had discovered the emotional layer in the alien signal. She had spent months learning to understand the patterns. She had practiced until she could almost feel the meanings beneath the mathematics. If anyone could talk to these beings, it was her. The third was Commander Mireille from Admiral Junho's fleet. She was not going as a warrior. Humanity did not want to send weapons. But someone needed to protect the delegation if things went wrong. Someone needed to make sure they could come home. Mireille had sworn to do exactly that. The fourth was Professor Hyunwoo, a philosopher and historian. He was 98 years old, one of the oldest members of the mission. Some thought he was too old for such a journey. But Hyunwoo had studied human history for his entire life. He understood why people did things. He understood what drove them to reach for the stars. Someone needs to remember why we are doing this, he said when they asked why he wanted to go. Not for power, not for knowledge, for connection, for the simple hope that we are not alone. The fifth and final member of the delegation was Yuna herself. The council had insisted. For 40 years, she had kept the observatory running. She had believed when no one else did. She had kept the light burning in the darkness. You have earned this, Prime Counselor Yoonji told her. More than anyone alive, you deserve to see what the silence was hiding. Yuna tried to argue. She was too old, she said. Too unimportant. But in her heart, she wanted to go more than she had ever wanted anything. So she said yes. The ship they built was called the First Light. It was not a warship. It was not armed. It was designed for one purpose only: to carry hope across the stars. On June 1st, 6147, the first light departed from Earth orbit. Billions of people watched. On Earth, on Mars, on all 300 worlds where humans lived, people gathered around screens to see the small ship begin its journey. Many cried. Many prayed. Many simply stood in silence, watching history unfold. The journey would take 3 months. 3 months of traveling faster than any human had traveled before. 3 months of waiting and wondering what they would find. On the ship, the 5 members of the delegation settled into their routines. Captain Saijun ran checks on the engines every day, making sure everything was working perfectly. Mireille studied the star maps, planning escape routes they hoped they would never need. Jiwoo practiced the alien communication patterns, speaking to the empty air in a language that had no words. Professor Hyunwoo spent most of his time in the observation deck, watching the stars drift past the windows. He was writing, recording his thoughts. He wanted future generations to know what this moment felt like. "We are so small," he wrote one evening. "Our ship is a tiny speck in an ocean of darkness. And yet we carry within us something larger than ourselves. We carry the dreams of everyone who ever looked up at the night sky and wondered." Yuna often joined him in the observation deck. She would sit quietly, watching the stars, thinking about all the years she had spent waiting. One night, Taiho called her from back home. His face appeared on the screen, smiling but worried. "Director," he said, "how are you feeling?" Yuna looked out the window at the endless space. "I feel like our ancestors must have felt," she said softly, "when they built their first boats and sailed into unknown waters. When they left their caves and walked toward the horizon. Scared, excited, alive." She smiled, and tears formed in her old eyes. I feel like I am finally doing what I was born to do. Taiho, I am going to meet the universe. The first light flew on, carrying 5 humans toward a meeting 4,000 years in the making. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just another star in the sky. Ahead of them, the unknown weighted dot, and humanity held its breath. The Kepler 442 system was quiet. A dim orange star hung in the center, older and cooler than Earth's sun. A few rocky planets circled it slowly. Nothing special, nothing remarkable, nothing to suggest that history was about to be made here. Then Captain Sojun saw the structure. It orbited the 4th planet. It was huge, bigger than anything humans had ever built. Towers of crystal reached out in all directions, catching the faint starlight and breaking it into colors that had no names. The whole thing looked like a frozen flower, beautiful and strange and impossibly old. "My God," Sojun whispered, staring at the screen. "That thing must be millions of years old." Dr. Jiwoo checked her instruments. Her hands were shaking. 3.7 million years, she confirmed. They have been here for 3.7 million years. The number was too big to understand. 3 million years ago, humans had not existed. Earth had been a wild place of forests and beasts. And all that time, this structure had been floating here, waiting. A signal came from the crystal towers. Not words, music. A haunting melody that seemed to speak directly to their hearts. Jiwoo listened carefully, translating the feelings hidden in the sounds. "They are saying welcome," she said softly. "They are saying they have been waiting. They are saying they are glad we came." The first light moved closer. A platform extended from the structure, reaching out toward them like a hand offered in friendship. Sojun guided the ship gently onto it. For a long moment, no one moved. "Atmosphere readings are good," Mireille reported, checking her equipment. "The air is breathable. The gravity is the same as Earth. They made this for us. They prepared for our arrival." Professor Hyungwoo stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. "Then we should not keep them waiting any longer," he said. The 5 humans walked to the airlock. They stood together in silence, looking at the door that separated them from the unknown. 4,000 years of hoping. 4,000 years of dreaming. Everything had led to this moment. Yuna stepped forward and pressed the button. The door opened. They walked out onto the platform. The air was warm and smelled faintly of flowers. Light danced around them, reflected from the crystal walls. A path of soft light led forward, inviting them deeper into the structure. They followed it. The path led to a great chamber. The ceiling was so high they could not see it. The walls shifted with gentle colors. And in the center of the chamber, waiting for them, were the beings who had called them here. The Yuli. They were tall, much taller than humans. Their bodies were thin and graceful, like trees made of silver. Their skin seemed to glow softly from within. Their eyes were large and deep, reflecting light like mirrors pointed at distant stars. There were 5 of them, the same number as the human delegation. They stood in a row, perfectly still, watching the humans approach with patience that had been learned over millions of years. One of them stepped forward. Its movements were slow and gentle, like someone trying not to scare a frightened animal. Then it spoke. The words did not come through the air. They appeared directly in the humans' minds, wrapped in warmth and wonder and something that felt very much like love. "You came. After so long in the darkness. You actually came." Professor Hyunwoo found his voice first. He stepped forward, his old legs trembling, but his spirit strong. "We received your message," he said out loud. He knew they could understand. "We had to answer. We had to know. Are we alone in the universe?" The Yuli made a sound. It might have been laughter. It might have been crying. It might have been both. "We have watched the stars for millions of years," it said. "We have seen so many things, Civilizations rising, civilizations falling, species destroying themselves with war and hate and fear. We have watched so many lights go dark. It moved closer. Its silver fingers reached out, hovering near Hyun Woo's wrinkled hand. But you, it continued, your kind is different. You kept calling out into the darkness, generation after generation. Even when no one answered, even when hope seemed foolish, you kept reaching out. Yuna felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. Do you understand how rare that is? The Yali asked. Do you know how precious? Most species give up. Most species decide that silence means they are alone. They stop calling. They stop hoping. They turn inward and forget the stars. It looked at each of the humans in turn. But not you. You never stopped. 4,000 years of silence, and still you kept the lights burning. Still you kept sending messages into the void. Still you kept believing. Dr. Jiwoo stepped forward. Her voice was thick with emotion. Why did you wait so long to answer? She asked. If you were listening all this time, why did you not respond sooner? The Eely was quiet for a moment. Something like sadness crossed its ancient face. Because we needed to be sure, it said. We needed to know that you would not give up. We needed to know that your hope was real. It gestured around the great chamber. You have passed a test that most species fail. You have proven that you deserve to know the truth. The truth about the galaxy. The truth about what happened. The truth about why the stars have been so silent. Commander Myray stepped forward, her hand instinctively moving toward where a weapon would be. But there was no weapon. Only empty air. What truth? She asked. What are you not telling us? The Eely looked at her with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. The truth, it said, is that the galaxy is not empty. It is afraid. And we are going to tell you why. The Eely's story took many days to tell. They gathered in the great chamber each day, the 5 humans sitting in a circle with the 5 ancient beings. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth of the galaxy was revealed. Millions of years ago, the Eoli explained, the galaxy had been alive with voices. Thousands of species had found each other among the stars. They built trade routes that stretched across entire arms of the galaxy. They shared art and music and philosophy. They learned from each other. They grew together. It was a golden age, a time when no one was alone. But then the war came. No one remembered how it started. Some said it was a misunderstanding. Some said it was greed. Some said it was fear of those who were different. Whatever the cause, the result was terrible beyond words. Weapons were built that could destroy entire star systems. Whole civilizations were burned away in moments. Planets that had been home to billions became empty rocks floating in the void. The war lasted for thousands of years, and when it finally ended, almost nothing was left. The survivors retreated. The Eoli continued. They hid. They went silent. They learned a terrible lesson. They learned that reaching out to others was dangerous. They learned that connection led to conflict. They learned that the only way to be safe was to be alone. Professor Hyunwoo listened with a heavy heart. So the silence was not because there was no one there, he said quietly. It was because everyone was hiding. Yes, the Eoli confirmed. The galaxy is full of species. Hundreds of them. Perhaps thousands. But they are all afraid. They have been afraid for millions of years. They watch each other from the shadows. They listen but never speak. They hide because they believe that hiding is the only way to survive. Dr. Jiwoo leaned forward. But you answered us, she said. If everyone is hiding, why did you break the silence? The Aeoli turned to look at her. Something like a smile crossed its silver face. Because you reminded us of who we used to be. It gestured at the humans with long, graceful fingers. Before the war. Before the fear. We were like you once. young, hopeful, reaching out to the stars with open hearts. We believed that connection was worth the risk. We believed that friendship was more important than safety. Its voice grew soft. We had forgotten that feeling. For millions of years, we have forgotten. But then your messages started arriving. So simple, so full of hope. You kept sending them, year after year, generation after generation. And slowly, we began to remember. Captain Saijun spoke up. The other species out there? He said. The ones who are hiding. Do they know about us? They know. Pioli replied. They have heard your messages too. They have been watching you for centuries. Then why have they not answered? Because they are afraid. They remember the war. They remember what happened when species reached out to each other. They are afraid that contact will lead to conflict again. Commander Mayray stood up. Her face was determined. But it does not have to be that way, she said. We are not here to fight. We are not here to conquer. We are just here to say hello. Pioli looked at her with something like wonder. We know, it said. That is why you are special. You have come all this way with no weapons. You have entered our home with open hands. You have shown us that connection does not have to lead to war. It turned to address all 5 humans. The other species have been watching this meeting. They have seen how you approached us. They have seen that you mean no harm. And for the first time in millions of years, some of them are beginning to wonder if perhaps they were wrong to hide. Yuna felt her heart swell with hope and fear. What happens now? She asked. Now, Pioli said, you have a choice. You can go home. You can tell your people what you have learned. You can live your lives knowing that you are not alone, but choosing to stay apart from the other species. That would be safe. That would be easy. It paused. Or you can help us wake them up. The chamber was silent. The other species have been sleeping in fear for too long. Pioli continued. They need someone to show them that it is safe to reach out again. They need someone to remind them that connection is worth the risk. It looked at each human in turn. We have tried. For millions of years, we have tried. But we are too old. We are too connected to the past. They see us and remember the war. They see us and feel afraid. But you are different. You are new. You have no part in the old conflicts. You carry no old guilt. When the other species look at you, they see only hope. Professor Hyunwoo stood up slowly. His old eyes were bright with tears. You want us to be ambassadors, he said. You want us to help rebuild what was lost. Yes, Pioli said. We want you to help us end the long silence. One species at a time. One world at a time. We want you to show the galaxy that it is possible to reach out without being destroyed. It extended its hand toward Yuna. Will you help us? Yuna looked at her companions. She saw determination in Murray's eyes. Hope in Jiwoo's, wisdom in Hyunwoo's. Steady courage in Saiyajin's. She took the Pioli's silver hand. Yes, she said. We will. And in that moment, across the galaxy, hundreds of hidden species watched through secret sensors and ancient listening devices. They saw a small human woman take the hand of a being 3 million years old. They saw 2 species choose trust over fear. And for the first time in millions of years, some of them began to believe that perhaps the silence did not have to last forever. Perhaps it was finally safe to speak again. Perhaps it was time to come out of the darkness. The humans had done the impossible. They had kept hoping when hope seemed foolish. They had kept reaching out when the universe refused to answer. And now, at last, their patience was being rewarded. The long silence was ending, and humanity would be the ones to break it.